So we'll start bang on 11 o'clock, and I'm sure a few people will join just after the hour. But in order to keep us to time, which I think is one of the important behaviors to adopt in virtual working, is stick to what you say you're going to do. So this is a 45-minute webinar, and it will be 45 minutes, and we'll start at 11 on the dot, which has just happened. So welcome, everybody. Welcome to our webinar on virtual delivery. Thank you so much for joining and for registering in advance. It's good to see you. My name is Joe Nagle, Innovation Director with the Innovation Beehive. As I was just saying to the people who joined before the hour, the reason we're holding this webinar is because a lot of our clients seem to be struggling with the idea of remote working, seem to have stumbled into it, and it's become quite an urgent thing that they need to do. So we thought we would share some of our best practice that we've learned over the years, some of the challenges we've encountered, some of the tools we use, and then some of the ways of working that will enable those tools to really come to fruition and be effective. We're also live streaming on Facebook, so hello Facebook world. Thank you for joining us. And there's going to be a recording of the webinar that will be shared afterwards. So anyone who's joining by phone, you'll get a video of this. So we're working through some slides and some polls and some conversation, but you'll absolutely be able to engage with that afterwards via the recording. So thanks everyone for joining, welcome, and here we go. So the first thing I'd love to know is, why are you here today? What drove you to be interested in the issue of virtual learning? I've just launched a poll for those of you who are joining from your desktop. That should have popped up on your screen now. If you can't see it for any reason, feel free to type your comment into the chat box, but I can see some responses are coming in. And if you do select that you've come for a reason that isn't on the screen, then please type it into the chat box so that we can talk about that as well. Great. And I've got a wonderful screen here, which is telling me exactly how many people have completed it. And I can see we're well on our way to 100%. So I'll give you a few more seconds. Great. A couple more seconds, and I can see a great message just coming from Paul, who says he's starting to become more involved in delivering flexible working capability, and he's curious. Great. So yeah, hopefully, Paul, you'll get something from this in terms of thinking about the best ways of doing that for your clients. Brilliant. Thank you. Okay, here we go. And the results are coming in. They should appear on your screen now. Fairly balanced. I'm pleased to see that there's a number of people here who've already been thinking about this. And you've been thinking about it for a long time, and I guess you're here to build your knowledge, and maybe you'll have things to share in the chat as we go, which is fantastic. Finding ways of staying connected virtually with customers, I think that's going to become more and more important. And you know, as we would have expected, the impact of COVID-19 and coronavirus on our ways of working is one of the biggest drivers for people being here today. But it's good to see that there's a variety of reasons for being here. I'm really pleased to see that. And hopefully what we talk about will really help you solve all of those challenges. It's also good to see some people who are involved in L&D thinking about how they can deliver virtual training. We've actually got another webinar about that on the 26th of March, which there's going to be a QR code to sign up for at the end of the webinar. So look out for that at the end. But thank you all so much for sharing. Now let's get into the content. And I really do think that, you know, we're going to hit the nail on the head in terms of what you're hoping to get from this. And I've just seen someone mention that they work in procurement, so working remotely is needed anyway when you're not supporting a particular business line. I guess I actually know Jared's business, and they're a sort of international business, and they operate multi-countries. So I guess that's part of what is driving the need to work remotely. Would that be right? See if he responds. But anyway, let's, yeah, great. Yeah, he said correct. Absolutely. So that's actually raised an interesting point that a lot of us are doing this already, working with virtual teams, working remotely. And I think there'll be a lot of learning that we can share with each other as the webinar goes on. Now, some of you may have seen this wonderful little video before. And I think it's a wonderful metaphor for what has happened. Shock. The world has had a shock, and that shock is, of course, coronavirus. You know, a lot of people are talking about how we should have been more prepared for the kind of, as it's called now, pandemic that we are experiencing. And I was watching the news last night and they were talking about how actually we are, maybe we didn't take advantage of the time that was bought by the, as they said, draconian measures taken in China. And now it's beginning to bite across the world. So, you know, as the majority of you said, you're here because of coronavirus. But actually, this shock that the world has experienced, it couldn't have come soon enough. We spend an average of £750 per employee per year in the UK on business travel. So that's travel to meetings, it's travel to other sites, it's travel to training courses, £750 per employee per year on average. So of course, some of us, if we work with senior leaders, the business travel costs would be significantly higher for those. If we work in certain sectors, business travel costs will be much higher. I know at the Innovation Beehive, our business travel costs are significantly higher than that because we travel all around the country and internationally to deliver training and projects. So that's one cost. That's one reason why I feel that this couldn't have come soon enough for the world, because there seems to be some saving that could be made there. Another key point is that the average commuter spends £1,750 per year to get to work. Now that £1,750, again, is an average. Some people are going to be spending 14 to 15,000 if they're commuting into London every day. Others are going to be walking to work. But that number doesn't just represent money, it represents time and productivity. Now, if we can increase productivity and save time, we can both improve our quality of living because we'll have a better work-life balance, but we'll also be more productive in work. And the third and perhaps most important, in my view, reason why the question around virtual working couldn't have come soon enough is because business travel is a bit of an elephant in the room when it comes to carbon emissions. This graph that I'm sharing here is a major professional services firm which has been working to reduce its carbon footprint since the late part of the last decade. And if you look at this graph, the top line is their overall carbon emissions, and it's been on a steady decline. There was a dip in 2010, which was of course linked to the financial crash. But apart from that, it's been pretty much in decline the whole time. But if you look at the bottom line, that is the carbon footprint of their business travel. And you can see that it's basically stayed stagnant the whole time. So it's been the forgotten aspect of our sustainability goals in our organizations. And until we sort that out, we're never going to become truly sustainable. And Paul has just made a really good comment here about the costs associated with office space to house employees centrally. Absolutely, that's another cost to not focusing on remote working. Yeah, it was a big issue in banking, absolutely. Another comment here about motivation and productivity of the team. That's another point. If you give people flexibility and you show them that you trust them, then absolutely you will see an increase in productivity. So that's a little bit of the context and the background as to why I felt that it was important to hold this webinar and share some of our learnings. And yeah, of course, it's time to get serious about virtual collaboration. I'm sure you were all ahead of me in the narrative there. But what I'd like us to cover today is some of the challenges of virtual working, some of the tools that we've used at the Innovation Beehive that make for effective virtual working, how we set up for success beyond those tools, because tools themselves will never solve the problem. You need to do a whole lot of other stuff in order to make it work. And then finally, we'll think to next steps. Okay, so someone who's just commented that they can't see people's comments. Yeah, there's an option to post to panelists, or there's an option to post to all attendees. Please feel free to share with everybody, and then everyone can see them. If not, I'll be keeping an eye on the comments as we go. So I'll share what people see. Thanks for that. So first of all, we'll dive into the challenges that we see. So what are the big challenges that you see in virtual working for your context and your organization? I'm conscious we've got some entrepreneurs on the call with us today, so we're probably going to get some really interesting different perspectives. We've also got people from big corporate organizations, and I think we've got some people from the public sector on here as well. It'd be great to hear some different perspectives, and maybe you can mention in the comments whether you're coming at this as an entrepreneur, as someone who's part of a bigger organization, or as someone who's in the public sector. It'd be great to get those different responses. So Alex has said, getting trust from managers who are used to literally keeping an eye on people. I like the use of the word literally there, Alex. And Alex comes from a corporate background, but that sense of actually, being able to see what people are doing and know people are doing what you're expecting them to do is a really big challenge, and enabling trust. So thinking about how managers can trust people on the back of that. Keeping people's attention, absolutely, Laura, that's going to be a really important one. So maintaining a team feel, impact on engagement, absolutely, yeah. So a consultant and workshop facilitator has said it's hard to lead and engage. It's hard to lead and manage a group when you're doing it through a screen. And I was talking to one of my team this morning actually about the importance of body language and being able to facilitate accordingly. Again, we've got a message from someone who's working with clients. It's about getting interaction and engagement. Well, I know from my job that, you can send an email out and get incredibly low engagement because people are getting so many emails. And I guess if we move to virtual working, we need to get creative about how we can find other ways of reaching out and connecting with people potentially. Leaders not being able to pop out to people's desks and ask questions. I mean, that must be coming from an organization where people do that already. I think some organizations might not see that as a problem if their leaders aren't doing it already. But yeah, that's absolutely a key point, is the visibility and the connection of leaders to the people. Different level of adoption of various tools among team members, absolutely. And we're going to get into that when we look at the tools, is how do you make sure people are using them to the right level, but also using them consistently. Getting enough feedback on work completed. Yeah, absolutely. And that comes from a corporate. So someone said, our organization's a real mix of UK office-based employees, global employees, and traveling employees. Not one size fits all answer for this question. Absolutely. And that's true. And, there's a big piece around contextualization, which is where we come into setting the right tone for virtual working. It might be different in different cultures, different teams even, and be prepared for that flexibility within the organization. Might be something that you need to do depending on the specific challenges you're facing. Running virtual workshops with clients, it's an important one. Our messages getting lost in translation with non-human to human conversation. I think that's really key, actually. You can send a really short email because you're in the middle of doing something, but the other person feels that you've been really short with them. And of course you haven't, you've just been trying to get stuff done. Everyone prefers a different way of communication, and some find virtual working not effective. Absolutely. So there's a piece around how do we engage people who maybe naturally feel more inclined to face-to-face conversation if the external environment means that we simply can't. And virtual interaction has a knock-on effect to the psychological safety participants feel when facilitating a group. Absolutely. I think we'll talk a little bit about psychological safety when we get on to behaviors and ways of working. It's really important. We're social creatures. Isolation stifles stuff. One of the things that we say around innovation is that creativity is about building connections, and one of the best ways of doing that is through conversation. So it's about finding new ways of having those moments of connection and communication. Absolutely. Great. Thank you all for sharing. That was brilliant. When I was putting this together, I came up with sort of three nuggets, three phrases that I've heard from clients over the last few weeks. We don't know what tools to use. We won't be communicating as effectively and connecting, and people just won't engage. So, three top line, which I think captures a lot of what you were talking about there. I think what we'll go through for the rest of the webinar is really going to connect and hopefully help with some of the challenges that you've outlined there. So what I'm going to do now is kind of rattle through, hopefully I'll do it in a bit more of an engaging way than that, but I'm going to talk through some of the tools that we use at the Innovation Beehive to stay connected with our clients and keep our teams connected. I'll be sending you after this a PDF document which goes into a little bit more detail about these and gives some top tips that we've found on how to use them effectively. And I should say these are kind of catch-all terms, so within them there'll be lots of tools that are sort of specific tools, but these are kind of top line. So first off, virtual meetings, instant messenger apps, and webinars. Crucially, these are the tools that we use to keep connected. So instant messenger apps, I've got WhatsApp on my phone, and my team has a fantastic thing which we call Team Nonsense, and we share GIFs, we share pictures, we share what we're up to, we share photos from workshops and engagements with clients. We share, There's one that was shared the other day, my precious, because we were talking about the loo roll shortage. So, you know, we've got a very fun and engaging way of keeping connected, keeping those moments of connection, either when people are off delivering across the country or across the world, or when, as some of our team do, working from home for a number of days a week. So we keep connected in a really fun and engaging way by having a safe space for us to play, really. And, you know, a lot of our more sort of formal business orientated communication tends to happen by email. So what we've done is use the instant messenger app to have that sense of connection and fun. Virtual meetings we use all the time with our clients on projects and also planning training sessions, etc. The thing about virtual meetings is there are loads of tools out there. You know, we're using Zoom today to run this webinar. We also use it for virtual meetings. And the reason we chose Zoom was so that it had that dual functionality, so that everyone in our team only needed to learn how to use one piece of software. But you can also use Skype. You can use the Office 365 has a way of meeting virtually, as does Google with Google Hangouts. So whatever program you decide to use, make sure it works for you and your people. And then webinars are a fantastic way of keeping connected. I would say, you know, it's important to use the tools. So we're having great conversation on the chat here. And it's also important when you're doing webinars to think about the general sense of engagement. So you're going to notice that I'm seeking to keep you engaged, and I keep checking my watch to make sure that I keep you engaged, because engagement slips after 8 minutes. So in about 4 minutes time, I'm going to ask you to do something again, just warning you. So they're the keeping connected tools. In terms of keeping engagement, which I know is a challenge that a number of people were talking about, we find that actually sharing content is really valuable. So share videos, share podcasts, share articles, share PDFs. And you'll notice there that I talked about videos, podcasts, and articles. So you've got video, which is visual. You've got podcast, which is audio, and you've got PDF, which is which is reading something or looking at a picture. There's 3 different learning styles at play there and 3 different ways of engaging. And that's really important. To keep engagement, you need to speak into and play into people's different learning styles. And the reason I put learning management system on this slide is because one learning that we've had at the Innovation Beehive is we've created a wiki, which is where we store all of these amazing articles and resources and links to fantastic assets that we've discovered on the internet that we've shared with each other, share sort of, you know, that this is of interest to me, it might be of interest to you, or this is of interest to me, what do you think about this? But it means that we've got a repository for them. Some of your organizations will already have a learning management system. If you use Office 365, as one of the people on the chat has just mentioned, you can use a SharePoint to give people easy navigation of these tools, of the resources that you're giving them that are available. So within the keeping engagement, you've got all of these assets that you can use, but then you need to think, how do I use them effectively? And one of the most effective ways that I've found, and we found at the Innovation Beehive, is not just to share the thing, but also say why you're sharing it, why you think it might be useful to the people you're sharing it with, and crucially, ask a question. Because when you ask a question in response to the stimulus that you've given people, you stimulate conversation and you generate engagement. So videos, podcast, and learning management system are brilliant tools that are available to you to keep engagement. And we're going to talk about another mechanism for keeping engagement in the next section of the webinar. Finally, keep productive. So collaboration platforms, and this is a real catch-all term. I'm talking the whole of Office 365. I'm talking all of the Google apps that you can have. And I've just seen a question from someone. So can you say that again about what is effective sharing? I think what you were maybe referring to there is how you share effectively. So what I was saying was, you know, don't just share the video or the podcast or the article, say why you're sharing it. So say why you're sharing it, why you think it will be of use to the people you're sharing it with, and then ask them a question, so that when you ask a question, you stimulate conversation on the back of sharing the article or the podcast or the video. Does that answer your question? Hope so. In terms of collaboration platforms, we're talking things like Office 365. Dropbox has a way of collaborating on documents. One of the real advantages of using cloud-based collaboration platforms is that you can work on documents in real time without the worry of version control, because they're very clever, and I don't know how they do it. It's probably to do with AI and machine learning. or some other genius technology that Microsoft and Google have developed. But you're able to edit in real time without clashing and without getting confusion. You're able to just work on documents together completely collaboratively. The other advantage of collaboration platforms is that you can create integrations between different apps. So for example, on Office 365, which is what we use at the Innovation Beehive, there's a brilliant tool called Flow, which effectively creates automations between tasks. Now this takes a lot of work to set up, but once it's set up, it can really save time and increase productivity and increase the effectiveness of the work that people are doing. Crucial thing to say on that, of course, is make sure people know what these integrations do so that they understand how to work most effectively and don't duplicate work as they go. Now, we're an innovation company, and a lot of what we do is to do with collaborative creativity. So we use a huge array of digital creativity tools, and I'm not going to go into too much depth on these, but I just wanted to talk about a few that I have on my iPad. So we have a storyboarding app, which enables us to effectively create a prototype customer journey or a prototype product even, because we can sort of show how people might use it. We've got design apps like Canva that enable us to create prototype websites, prototype posts for social media. We've got a stop motion app on here, which enables us to create really fun videos that we can share with our clients and end users to get their feedback on. So, you know, creativity tools aren't necessarily going to be useful to everyone in every context, but they're out there and you can use them and you can make the most of the tools that are there, often at a very low cost or completely free. And, you know, just invite your team to get involved. So what I would say is, you know, whether you're in a large corporate or you're an entrepreneur or you're in a small company, don't just be constrained by the existing technology. You know, look beyond it. And you know, there's going to be IT systems in place and IT security in place, which might mean that certain apps are not allowed on your internal servers. Absolutely understandable, because, you know, you deal with your customers' data and you deal with your employees' data. It's really important to protect. But get creative about how you can maybe bring some of this into your way of working when you're working virtually. Tanya, yes, I'll share some of the app names at the end of the session, but I would also encourage you to just get creative. If you go online or onto the App Store and search for creativity, you'll find loads of tools, and you'll probably find ones that I haven't found, but please do. I'll definitely share them at the end. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and then just lastly, just to mention online surveys. So, you know, you did a poll at the beginning, that's a survey. We use SurveyMonkey to build engagement with our clients and to seek understanding from them in the insight phase of our innovation projects. We've also got a couple of scorecards on our website that give people a little understanding of what their innovation personality type is, or what their organization's innovation ecosystem is like. These are brilliant tools for building engagement, but also for keeping productive, because you can use things like a doodle poll, which enables you to easily arrange meetings and schedule meetings. You can use SurveyMonkey to get quick feedback on work that's been done. So to Alex's point earlier, you know, getting quick feedback, maybe a survey would be a solution to that. So that's 9 of the tools that we use at the Innovation Beehive. And I'm just going to launch another poll to ask you, which of those tools have you used before? And you can answer as many as apply to you. Bear in mind, you know, some of these were very broad subject titles, so, you know, feel free to select as many as apply that you feel apply to you. Hoping you can see, yep, people's responses are coming in now. And I'd just like to point out that what I'm doing now is I'm role modeling one of the best practices in running webinars, which is to keep engagement high by you know, talking for a few minutes and then giving participants something to do. So I'm letting you behind the curtain there to see one of the reasons why I'm doing this is so that you stay engaged. Because as nice as my voice sounds and as my face looks, I'm sure that a poll is more interesting. Now, Jeremy has said, learning to use all of these systems, apps, programs, etc., takes time, and unless you're slick at this, your meeting will suffer. Absolutely, and I'd say one of the key considerations is to think of this as a change management program effectively, and, you know, apply the same principles. And we're going to get into those in the next section to think about how to do this really effectively. Great comment, thank you. Great, so it looks like everyone's had a chance to cast their vote. And as you would expect, there's a fairly broad range of responses here. Virtual meetings comes in at the top. That's really good, actually. 83% of you have said that you've used virtual meetings before. So, you'll be sort of familiar with it, which is great. I can see that people aren't using podcasts so much. So 33% of you have used podcasts. I can't get enough of podcasts. So I highly recommend that you use them, because they are something that you can use, on your commute if you are commuting to work. But if not, it's something you can do whilst you're doing other things. So podcasts are a great resource. Someone has just commented that it is time consuming, but it's nice to learn from failure and learn by doing. And one of the things that I meant to say at the start of this session is, if things go wrong, we're all learning from our failures as we go, particularly when it comes to technology. Here are the results. As I said, fairly balanced, but virtual meetings coming on top. Good to see a lot of people using instant messenger apps as well. And there's a nice conversation going on about podcasts on the chat there. That's great. So brilliant. So that's some of the tools. And as I say, I'll share a PDF by email with you after the webinar, along with the recording of the webinar. So thinking about setting up for success. You wouldn't let someone drive a car without making sure that they'd had lessons first, right? And similarly, you shouldn't expect people to just be able to use the tools that you're asking them to use without giving them some training first. We all need motivation to keep going at the gym. We've got a personal trainer here. We don't always have that luxury. Sometimes we need to self-motivate, and both of those dynamics are at play when it comes to virtual delivery and virtual working. Yes, we need to keep people motivated if we're part of a team. All of us can see it as our role to keep people motivated. It doesn't just need to be the leader of the team, but also if we're working from home, we need to be self-motivated as well. So there's two aspects to that, and we need to take responsibility for both. And then we need to think about context and new ways of working, because we need to desperately try and avoid the sort of faux pas that we have here.
The single to the queen.
So awkward. And then the beautiful way that it was recovered. So as we saw there, the faux pas is that the national anthem is playing and you shouldn't speak over the national anthem, and no one else was going to do anything other than do what they were supposed to do in that moment, apart from the Queen, who said very kind thank you, which I think is just lovely. But, there was a different context for the President of the United States. An awkward moment ensued. It would be great if we can avoid those awkward moments in the future. So let's get into that. Well, let's get into the skills people are going to need first. So, first and foremost, people are going to need to know how to use the skills. The basics need to be in place. And you know what? You can do this yourself, or you can use existing tools that are out there. There's loads of how-to videos on YouTube, on LinkedIn Learning, that you can share with people for how to use these different tools. Often the tools themselves will provide how-to videos, so use those. Obviously, why not? It's a great thing to use. You can create simple user guides for people, and you can also consider using audio. So, one of the things that we're starting to do with our clients is, instead of sending them emailed updates on project plans, we're recording a message on WhatsApp, which lasts about 30 seconds, and it's just a quick update. A quick audio update that they can listen to whilst they're driving in the car if they need to, rather than having to sit down and go through their emails. So, you can use podcasts and audio to talk people through how to use the tools. The key thing to say, though, is think about the user experience and select the tools that complement this whenever you can. So find tools that are easy to use, easy to engage with. We use Zoom because the polls are easy to use. We use Zoom because you can have chat functionality. And we tend not to use the whiteboard because we find that's often browser specific, or people need to download the app. So we try to keep it as simple as possible for people. Okay? So two things. One is give people the knowledge and the skill to use the tools, but think about the tools that you're using to make sure that they're as easy as possible to use. Now, one of the things that I know I've done over the years is almost like hack the systems that we use at the Innovation Beehive. So I've changed the way that they're used to make them work for me. That's a sort of organizational nuance that you may be doing in your business, in your organization, you may be doing in your interactions with clients. So you may find that you come up with all sorts of uses for Trello, for example, which is a Kanban style project management tool, which goes beyond what Trello was designed for. And all you need to do is let people know what that difference is. And then they'll, and help them understand how it works and how they can make it work. One of the nuances that we have is on our CRM system, our customer relationship management system. We use tags for all sorts of things, right? Probably more than we should. And probably there's a better way of doing it than we do, but it works for us. And as long as my team know what those tags mean and how to deploy them themselves, well, it works. You can add that to your simple user guides, to your podcasts, and hacking tools is a good thing to do. It's good because it means they'll work for you in an even better way. So I'm just going to double check how we're doing with the conversations on the chat before I move on. There's conversation going on about VR, right? I'm going to let that conversation carry on because I personally haven't used Meet VR, but I can imagine that it will be an amazing tool to use. That sounds really exciting. I'm going to have to look into that. And this is the joy of webinars like this, by the way. I'm discovering something new as well. I'd love to know more about that. Please, if there's a link or something, please feel free to share it in the chat box there. Final point on what people will need in terms of tools is you need to think about how these tools can fit together really well. So Office 365 will do a lot of this work for you, but obviously Zoom isn't part of Office 365. You might want to consider APIs. Don't ask me what it stands for, I'll just tell you what it does. So an API is where you can connect one piece of software with another piece of software, and they speak to each other in a way that works for you. A great website to look at for that is called Zapier, which enables you to build connections between different apps. And thank you, Paul. Application Programming Interface is what API stands for. Thank you very much. Use APIs, use application programming interfaces to connect apps together, or use the existing infrastructure that's in place, for example, through Office 365, and build those automations. As I said, there's a brilliant program called Flow within Office 365 that enables you to do that. But the crucial thing is make sure people know what these automations are going to do and what these interconnections are enabling them to do, what the limitations of them are, and make sure people know if there's anything that's still manual, because otherwise things will start to fall over. And I can see that Jara has shared meetingvr.net. So if anyone's interested in VR meetings, feel free to visit that site. Thank you very much. So yeah, that's some of the skills people are going to need. Now thinking about how we will motivate people. I mentioned earlier, videos, WhatsApp, podcasts, the learning management system where you can store all of this amazing content. But I'd say the single most important way of engaging people when they're virtual is to give them a sense of constant encouragement. Because when people are in an office together, they can have the water cooler conversations, they can have the clashing together in the kitchen to have these chats that enable that sense of connection, that sense of strong relationship and team spirit. And that is harder virtually. So one thing to consider is gamifying things like that, things like communication and engagement. One of the things that we did for a client was developed a recognition scheme it's a large organization, and we developed recognition cards which were given out. They're physical at the moment, but we're looking at ways of moving it to digital. And one of the things that was done with that was to encourage recognition cards to be given, because the key thing is that they could be given by anyone to anyone for anything that was seen as positive. But the key thing was you had to write what you were giving the recognition card for. So what we did to encourage this new behavior in the organization, we had an award for the employee of the month, and that was the person who received the most quality recognition cards. And we also had a reward for the person who'd given the most recognition. The key thing is that we checked the quality of the recognition before giving the award, because of course that system sounds very easy to game, doesn't it? It sounds very easy to cheat. I'll just give, I've got my colleague Emma sitting on the other side of the camera here. I'll give her 50 recognition cards, so she'll win a prize and I'll win a prize. That's not how it worked. They needed to be quality. You needed to have taken the time to say why you were given the recognition. So that's one really simple way of gamifying a particular behavior that you want people to adopt and you want people to embed. And you can think of all sorts of ways of doing that. And all you need to do is Google the word gamification and you'll find a whole plethora of ideas online about that. So I'm not going to go too much further in. I'm not going to go into any more detail on gamification on this webinar because we want to get through as much as we can, a sort of strategic overview of virtual delivery. But yeah, so videos, podcasts, keep things together on a learning management system, use articles, use WhatsApp to keep conversations going, and gamify the behaviors and the processes that you want to see people adopt. And now over to you, again in the chat box. I'd love to know, what ways of working and behaviors do you think people should be adopting and crucially avoiding when working virtually? So we talked about the importance of the tools, but actually to make those tools really effective, some of the challenges that you all talked about were around how do people stay engaged, how do people stay motivated, and how do people behave in a way that works for these tools. So what ways of working and behaviors should people be adopting and avoiding when working virtually? And pop them in the chat box. So some to adopt, use what virtual tools you have to allow people to feel heard and give them a voice. Absolutely. And, sometimes, so for example, in virtual meetings, I would strongly encourage you when you're meeting as a team, get on video, everybody speaks, maybe goes on mute when they're not speaking, but everyone is encouraged to speak rather than use the chat box. On webinars, the context is different because there's 47 people on this webinar right now. So actually, if everybody was talking, we wouldn't all be able to hear one another. So it's about using the tool in the right way. Having an open mind and a willingness to try and get involved. Absolutely, someone mentioned earlier about the benefits of failure. So giving it a go is a really great way of doing that. Make time to play, connect socially, and so on. Yeah, like we do on our WhatsApp group at the Innovation Beehive. We make time and we make fun and we connect in that way. Your rules of engagement, keep people engaged throughout with different tools as discussed. Absolutely, Tanya, that's great. And I think the rules of engagement, you need to set them, but you might find they change and evolve over time. So long as it's with the agreement of the people who you're working with, you can't change them without that sense of agreement. Ensuring that completely clear individual expectations, in brackets, targets, are agreed and communicated. Absolutely. People are going to need a clear sense of what their purpose is in their role, their purpose and their mission. And that needs to be really, really communicated and probably reiterated more than if they're working in an office environment, because in the office environment, you're going to have that latent sense that we're all working towards this goal. If people are working from home, they don't have that bouncing around. Make people feel like participants versus audience members completely. And I hope in some small way you felt that today through the engagement that we've had. But when you're working with your teams in particular and with your clients, absolutely involve them completely 100% of the way. So have a chance for a first face-to-face relationship that will later on work better in virtual working. Absolutely. I think, and whether you're working with clients or working with your team, I think trying to build some face-to-face into the mix is really valuable and important. Of course, if the environmental conditions around us mean we can't, then we have to find other ways of building the benefit that would bring. Keep a chat group open all day with your team to try and replicate being co-located. It's an easy way for people to have an online conversation. Really simple, really easy. There's the tool. Use it, and the tool itself may generate the right behaviors. What I would add to that is you can become the convener of that community by being active in that group throughout the day. So if you're going to do that, I'd say be the convener. Ask for feedback, what works well and what issues people might have so that you discover them early. Absolutely. Okay, so avoid facilitated with normal human interaction length of silence because it can feel like tumbleweed. It's a really interesting point. I know as a facilitator, But one of my tricks is to stand there until people respond when I ask a question. Doesn't necessarily work in the same way virtually, and it can maybe feel a little aggressive potentially. Be respectful. When you're working from home and on video and so on, you're effectively being invited into someone's home. So be inclusive if the dogs or kids come in. I love that. I love that. And be inclusive and also celebrate it, because this is someone's life that you've been invited into. So enjoy it, you know, ask the dog's name, ask what the kids are up to, etc. I love that. Use action learning sets to focus on the right questions, not comments. Take care with judgment and keep webinars collaborative. Absolutely. Brilliant. So we've had some really great behaviors and behaviors to avoid. If I had to sort of summarize those in a top line way, I might talk about trust, the importance of effective communication. There's an element of personalization. There's an element of keeping focused. And there's a big element about being present. So being present, I was once on a meeting with a client, and one of my colleagues, we were meeting virtually. This was in a previous role. And as soon as they finished their presentation, I could hear them start typing. You know, it's tap, 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 as I'm sure you're hearing now. And that was incredibly distracting for me and the client as we moved into our conversation in the room. So we agreed after that in that organization that we weren't going to do that again. And, you know, be present, not do other things whilst you're on a team meeting, as you wouldn't do if you were in a face-to-face team meeting. So some of the things that I'm sensing we may need to avoid from the conversations that have gone on here is around maybe oversharing isn't quite the right word, but keeping it right for the world of work, right? So, you know, we don't want to be sharing oversharing personal stuff if that's not right for our culture. Having said that, if that's the culture that your team has, maybe it is right. There's a sense of not wanting to micromanage people too much. You know, if they're working from home, maybe don't see 9 to 5 as the hours of work, because they can be productive at other times of the day when they're not commuting for 2 hours first thing in the morning or 2 hours in the evening, and when they've got all of the kit they need to work at home. So, and also maybe, and again, just set that ground rule about not doing other things when you're in a virtual meeting. I think that is so important. Oh, and there's a cracking one here, which has just come in. Build in variety, weekly same old meetings, mix it up, rotate who leads, change questions, etc. I love that. Really, really brilliant. Just simple step to improve things. Paul has just commented that there's a big problem with management not being done because of a fear of micromanagement. That's really dangerous. Agreed, Paul. And it's all about agreeing the effective ways of working for your team. And you know, one of the reasons why I wanted to have the conversation then, rather than just me tell you what I think the behaviors are, is because it's important to get them right for your team and for your culture. So the behaviors that you agree, the mindset, the ways of working that you agree will absolutely be specific to your culture and team. So be flexible in your approach to creating them, but be sure to get agreement on them. And if you need to change them or evolve them because of changing circumstances, be sure to get agreement and buy-in for those as well. So we're almost at the end of the webinar. So just to recap, there's a whole load of tools that you can use, and you need to identify which tools are going to work for you and in your context, and think about how best to use them. You then need to make sure that you train your people in how to use those tools effectively. And we're actually running a webinar, as I mentioned earlier, on the 26th of May. And if you have an iPhone, you can scan that QR code and it will take you directly to the registration page for that webinar. So please do feel free to register. I'll also send the details in the email afterwards if you're not able to do that for any reason now. So in terms of motivation, it's important to make a plan for motivation. So I've got a whole plan of content that I'm going to be sharing with my team over the next few weeks, and indeed on a WhatsApp group that I'm going to tell you about in a moment. So you make a plan for engagement and gamify whenever you can and however you can. And as I said about the behaviors, remember that they need to be right for your people. They need to be flexible enough that they can be changed over time, so long as it's with the buy-in and the agreement of the people you're working with. For us at the Innovation Beehive, the biggest learning that we have taken from our delving into virtual learning over the years is that it's the same, but it's different. Same but different is a Southeast Asian thing. It's kind of, you know, it's about how we're all different, but we're all the same. For us, virtual learning is it's the same thing. We're trying to achieve the same thing. Virtual learning and so virtual working. We're trying to achieve the same thing, the same purpose for our organization, the same goals in the short and medium term. We're just having to do it in a different way. So it's the same, but different. And that, my friends, is the end of the webinar. Thank you so much for taking part. As a next step, as an immediate next step, if what you've heard is, oh, I think I may have mistyped on the previous slide. Indeed, it's the 26th of March, not the 26th of May. Thanks to everyone who's just pointed that out. Thank you. I guess one of the points I made earlier about when things go a little bit wrong. There you go. Thank you. 26th of March. On the last slide here, you'll find a QR code which will take you directly to a brand new WhatsApp group that I have just set up, Virtual Delivery Group. It will be absolutely wonderful to see you all in there if you're interested in joining. I can see someone has joined already, which is brilliant. This is what it looks like. It's going to be a place where we can practice what we have just discussed on this webinar. We can share with each other the best practice around virtual delivery that we find. We can ask questions to the group to get insight into how we might do it better. If you can't use the QR code, please do feel free to drop me a text message, 07803 513 132, or ping me an email, joe@innovationbeehive.com. It's been a pleasure talking to you today. Thank you all for engaging so brilliantly with the polls and on the chat. It's been great. And I finish 1 minute over, not too bad. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.